kind of an outsider trying to find her place. I'd say that was the theme that I started with. And I think anyone who writes can knows the feeling of letting the character sort of take them along. It's not like I had a very specific view of exactly how this was going to resolve itself, but she really has, the characters have kind of, you know, forced themselves on her, and she's also been, I put her in a lot of situations where she can't resolve it by herself, so she's forced to trust some people and let some people in, and she makes some mistakes by trusting the wrong people from time to time. And so in a way, I think it's, you know, it's a, when I think of it that way, I guess it's a bit of a metaphor for life for everyone, that, you know, we do go along a path and make our choices about who to trust and how much to relax and that kind of thing.
Lily has a Hispanic background. How important is that to the character? How does that impact the stories you write? And has it ever caused you to change something big in the story or series?
Well, I think that what I wanted it to be really was just a normal part of life. I didn't want it to be some huge thing that comes up all the time. Lily is raised by her grandmother, who's the woman who raised her father as well, and the grandmother's name is Graciela, and she's from Mexico. And part of that is just because I have a familiarity with Mexico, and I have a familiarity with some of the traditions of Mexico and some of the magical traditions of Mexico. And in Mexico, there are curanderas, who are folk healers, and brujas, who are witches, but most would call themselves curanderas. But there's this whole kind of rich tradition. And then, of course, there's the European tradition of witchcraft as well. But I wanted to be able to draw on both of those traditions. I'm not an expert by any means, but I do enjoy kind of pulling that in whenever. And then I enjoy just putting a little, I think I use it sparingly, a little spattering of Spanish here and there, especially when she's doing her spells, because it's sort of what connects her to her past. And I enjoy doing that just because where I live in California, you hear other languages a lot. And I think some people who are reading the books, you know, don't have that experience. And I always see it as an enriching thing and not a frightening thing. And so I try to share that.
I actually think you do a very good job of making it seem that that's just who she is. It doesn't seem like it's forced on her. It doesn't seem like you're adding things. Oh my gosh, I've got to make sure she says, you know, she says you know, this 3 or 4 times. It really does evolve naturally with the character.
Oh, good. Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I like it being kind of, you know, we're all a smattering of everything. I mean, that's one thing I love about this country. I mean, most of us are just, you know, these Heinz 57, a little here, a little there, you know, and I love that. I love that about this country, and you certainly see it in the Bay Area a lot. There are just all these influences everywhere, and that's what's fun.
Now, this is a little bit of a personal question, and I wanted to make sure I asked this.
Well, I already talked about my ex-husband, so go ahead.
My wife is from Texas. What do you have against it?
I actually, well, okay, I could answer that a number of ways. No, my mother is actually from Texas, and my mother's the youngest of 11, so I have a lot of cousins in Texas, a lot of aunts and uncles and cousins, and so I actually have a deep love for Texas, actually. But, here's the but. But I do think that there are some small towns, including my grandfather, who I never knew, but his family, he was raised in a small West Texas town that when we went to visit was very much sort of like the town that I talk about in the book. It was I felt like it was kind of a scary place to be. It was just very small-minded. The people I met it was a totally unfair sampling, because it was a quick in and out, and I met a few people, and it was just a very kind of small-minded sort of place, and I found that really difficult. And my grandfather was, I don't know what percentage he was, but he was part Native American, and that, I heard that like 3 times before I left town, and seriously, we were only there for like an afternoon, you know, but it was like pointed out to me several times about how really he didn't really belong to this family because he was part Native American, and it was like, I guess that would be me too then, right? I mean, I'm not seeing how this is a problem. So it was a very strange It was a very strange sensation I had when I was there. So I used that town. The town's not really in the book, but I use references to it because this is the town that Lily was run out of when she was a young woman. And she was run out because she had these powers, and it was a very small and small-minded town, and that couldn't deal.
Different.
And she was very different.
Different in the small town.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it really is not Texas, which is why I made up the name for the town, because I was like, yeah, I don't want to.
There are two romantic men in the series, but it isn't a typical Team Edward or Jacob type of relationship. How do you feel about Amy versus Sarah?
Okay, well, that's a good question. Well, if people haven't read the book, I guess I should preface it a little that Aiden is a powerful fellow in San Francisco. He's a witch himself, and Sailor is a psychic, but he's not a very happy psychic. He's not happy about being a psychic. So how do I feel about it? You're asking me to give away stuff. Now I have to give away stuff. I actually really like Sailor. Sailor was actually a character who, there is a romance brewing in the book, but he's a character who did not start out as a romantic character, who just kind of, the two characters on page had chemistry, and then I sort of went with it. So he's sort of a surprise, and I always liked that.
I actually have to tell you, with the first two books, I actually thought the detective was going to be more romantic.
Oh, really?
I
Okay.
thought the two of them clicked.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I've
Just-
actually had
just
people.
starting off with that, minor antipathy,
Yeah.
don't really trust him like you.
Right. That's interesting. I've had people write me about him,
Yeah.
actually. So who knows? Maybe book 10.
Okay, so let's skip on to Lily's true love, Oscar.
Oh, okay. Yes.
How did you decide on a pot-bellied pig as a familiar?
Well, he's a miniature pot-bellied pig. I should point that out. Pot-bellied pigs are big, so he's a miniature. It was when I was developing the story idea. I wanted her to have a familiar, but I didn't want to make it the traditional black cat, and that's only because we've seen it so much, and I wanted something a little bit different. And I was writing on a blog at the time, and I wrote a blog post about witches' familiars, and I looked back into history, and you see all these woodcuts of women with their familiar animals. And lots of animals were familiars. And so, the typical ones are owls, frogs, anything that is night-dwelling or transformational can often be a common familiar. But then there was this one great woodcut with a pig. It was three witches riding a pig, actually. And then I looked into that. I was like, oh, that's interesting with the pigs. And I had recently then too, I'm also an artist. I paint, and I had painted a painting that had to do with Circe, and she transformed men into pigs. And so it was just kind of clicking, the whole pig thing. And then when I did some research on it, the reason that pigs were often associated with witches was because they root in the earth. And there were times, especially in the European belief system, the earth was considered to be a dangerous and frightening place. So if you farmed, for example, you made sure that you put out offerings to the tree spirits. You did a lot of things because you're going to be mucking around with the earth, and nobody was quite sure what was down there, like if you dig too far. And I think that there are some sort of real primordial fears about the earth. And witches sometimes were considered suspect because they would dig. They would dig things out of the earth for roots, usually for botanicals, for roots. But pigs also dig, and then they're used for things like finding freckles and stuff like that. But yeah, so anyway, they were often associated with witches, and a particular kind of witch who does a lot of botanical stuff. So that's where it came from.
Now, I noticed that Oscar's even in one of the acknowledgments. Is there a real Oscar?
Well, the real Oscar is, and this is true, that after I had already begun the Witchcraft Mystery Series, and I named this creature, because the pig also transforms, he's actually kind of a gargoyle gnome fellow, and then he transforms into a pig. I had named him Oscar, and then shortly after that, my dog passed away, and the neighbor has 5 cats, And, and one of the cats started coming and hanging around, and he's a black cat with green eyes, and he looks just like a witch's cat. And when I looked at his little collar, it's Oscar. He's named Oscar. So I just thought, well, if that's, that's some sort of sign, right? So he's the one who comes and hangs out on my window ledge while I'm working. He pretty much owns the house now. So far, he has not transformed. No. But it's only a matter of time, right?
Now, the latest book is Tarnished and Torn, which is available now in the dealer's room. So after this interview's over, go out, buy it. It's wonderful. I won't give out any spoilers, but the book does tie up a lot of loose threads. So is this the last in the series, or are there going to be more?
No, there are more.
Oh.
There are more. Yes. It's so funny. I should put a disclaimer or something at the book. I've had a lot of people feel that way, that it tied up so many threads that maybe it's the last book. But no, A Vision in Velvet is the next one. It'll be out this spring. And yeah, it looks like there will be several more.
Oh,
yes,
great.
it's still going.
So let's move on to the haunted house renovation mysteries and Melanie Turner. During my research, I couldn't help but notice how similar the two of you are. Your descriptions are very similar. You both have experience rehabilitating and renovating historic homes. You both are divorced with a son. You're both constantly around haunted houses. Is she your alter ego?
That's funny. That's funny. I get asked this a lot.